Hello, my name is Chris and welcome to our When Land Meets the Sea podcast, a coastal mini-series by David Jones Bold. On this podcast, Richard and Lizzie take a road trip around the coast of England and Wales and visit some of the most significant cases and legal issues relevant to the coast. UK coastal towns are some of the best places in the world to be, but they also face major challenges, faring disproportionately worse than inland towns and cities for health, education, socioeconomics, crime, and more. Through this group, we are working to change that. For example, we recently worked with the government to get coastal communities added to the list of mayor competencies under the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Act 2026. We've also developed a framework for coastal placemaking and stewardship, which you can download for free at www.djblaw.co.uk/blue-horizons. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello, Richard.
Hello, Lizzie. What have you been doing lately?
I've been doing lots of thinking about case law on the coastline of the UK, of England and Wales. So continuing on that thought, we're going to talk about properties falling into the sea. That's the next topic. And there's a couple of really important cases on this that you can talk us through. The three that we're going to focus on are Taylor and Diamond, Holbeck Hall and Scarborough Borough Council, and the Crown on the application of Boggis and Natural England. So three to get stuck into, all about things falling into the sea. So where do you want to start?
We'll start in South Devon, if we can, in Torquay, Babbacombe. It was a bit of a national news story a few years back. It was a property, it was 1930s, six-bedroom property, so quite a big thing. And it was up for auction, and the auction pack basically said that the catalogues made clear that they've got severe structural damage and might have been beyond economic repair. But it's that's people always buy things at auction, and there's probably a very good reason that they're up for auction as opposed to a sort of normal sale. But anyway, Miss Sue Diamond was a retired police officer from London in Chiswick, and she was disabled by all accounts, and she was looking for a kind of second home on the coast in Devon. And she saw this property was up for auction and didn't look at it, didn't employ a surveyor, as people don't at auctions when they buy at auction, but didn't seem to look at the catalogue, which would have told her about all these severe structural damage and the likes of the property. And she put in a successful bid for £154,500. And obviously when the hammer goes down at the auction, you exchange contracts and you'll have to complete at a later stage. But unfortunately, between the exchange and the time she should have completed, the garden fell into the sea, to be precise, onto Oddicombe Beach. There's a 300-foot cliff that this property was on, and part of the property itself fell into the sea as well. And at a later stage, and this was back in this was back in 2012, 2010, I think it was, that she actually bought it and went to the auction. And she refused to go ahead with completion. Eventually, the property was demolished by the council, the whole of the property, in 2013. And so the owner, the person who put the property up for auction, Mr. Matthew Taylor, basically brought an action in court for specific performance. And she was required to perform the contract. And also, she had to finally, she didn't have to, but they put a charging order on her house in Chiswick, which was by all accounts worth £1.1 million. And that got to be sold as well. Don't just buy things at auction without looking at them first. It's just a phone bid.
Yeah, particularly if they're on the edge of a cliff.
Well, she didn't know this. She just thought she was getting a comparatively cheap property, with nice views of Babbacombe and Torquay. But I haven't got much sympathy. It's like, it's all these people. The Homes Under the Hammer has got a lot to answer for.
It certainly does.
People have a few drinks too many and then turn up at an auction and buy a property portfolio. I came across one. Somebody told me, a solicitor told me that it wasn't nothing to do with the coast, but that client had bought a house at auction in the West Midlands, paid quite a substantial sum of money for what it was, a terraced house, and didn't realise until they saw the solicitors that it was a leasehold house and it had 11 years left on the lease, which is why it's up for auction basically. And also the next door property, there wasn't a case on this, but a property called Tor Cottage, the one that Ms. Diamond accidentally bought was called Ridgemount House, but next door was Tor Cottage, and in 2013 that was bought at auction as well. The person there only paid £33,500, and in that occasion they realised they were taking a risk. They thought they just have, they couldn't live in the house, it's uninhabitable, but they'd have a nice view of Tor Bay from their garden, and they've got a wonderful view of Tor Bay now because it's in the sea, because it's in the sea. So that's the first one.
Quite a steep price to pay for a view, isn't it?
Well, they didn't realise. They were taking a punt. At least they knew that time. They were taking a punt on how long it's going to last. There's cases going up the coast to East Anglia. It's another place with a lot of erosion, where people are buying properties for £10,000, knowing they're going to go into the sea, around Hemsby and the likes, and Great Yarmouth and Norfolk, which is supposed to have the greatest, amongst the greatest coastal erosion areas in Europe. And there's been, in the last 5 years, there's been sort of 25 houses that have been lost to the sea, which will bring us on to the next one, which is only just a bit south of there.
So are we going to Scarborough?
No, I think we'll go in and talk about Mr. Boggis first.
Okay.
Because he's close, he's on the way to Scarborough, if you like. It's a place called Eastern Bavants, which is just north of Southwold in Suffolk. And used to be the most easterly point in mainland Britain, which tells you something about what's happening there, because it no longer is. Lowestoft down the way is. But this particular was a cliff, and Mr. Bavants lived in a property on top of the cliff. Sorry, Mr. Bavants, Mr. Boggis and Eastern Bavants, get that confused, lived in this property. It had been designated as a site of special scientific interest some years previously, back in the 1960s, because of the fact that it was a breeding ground for little terns and sand martins. But as the erosion occurred, he decided to take matters into his own hands. And at the bottom of the cliff, he put loads of builders' rubble and likes to try and stop the erosion. But then what happened is that Natural England changed where the site of special scientific interest was as the coast changed, which meant he couldn't put the builders' material there. So he brought judicial review. The court basically said, you're not going to be able to succeed. You can't sort of try and protect your own land, because the seabirds take priority. Not that the sand martin is a seabird. Yeah. So that's Mr. Boggis for you.
Mm.
Some of the other problems. But shall we go now up the coast, across the Wash and the Humber to North Yorkshire?
Yes, please.
And Holbeck Hall Hotel. I remember this being a national news story at the time. And Scarborough Borough Council. It was a 1870s Victorian property that was currently a hotel with about 30 rooms in it. It's a 4-star hotel, which was currently. And it was right on the cliff face. And suddenly and catastrophically in June of 1993, the whole of the garden fell off this, this south cliff in Scarborough, looking over the bay. About 300 footer and a million tons of sand and whatever. And then, stone and the likes fell into mud, fell right in the sea. Apparently, somebody who was walking their dog on the beach early in the morning was the first thing to spot it, and they evacuated the hotel. Part of the hotel went.
I'm just looking at photos on Google now. Certainly quite catastrophic.
Yeah, and because it was on the telly, part of it, the chimney and the likes, there were Richard Whiteley. Do you remember him from Countdown?
Yeah.
In his previous days, where he was, he was reporting on it, and as the report was going on, the thing sort of partially collapsed, and eventually again it was demolished and like. Years later, they brought action against the council who owned the cliff face and the likes, claiming that you should have done something about it, that you owe a measured duty of care. You've got to distinguish. I mean, historically, you've got to distinguish between something called nonfeasance and misfeasance. And nonfeasance is basically, as the name suggests, not doing anything. Just nature takes its course and the likes. Whereas misfeasance is perhaps you're doing things which cause to some extent the collapse or whatever it might be. And historically, it was always thought you were not liable as a landowner for nonfeasance, from natural activities and the likes. But there'd been a case, you might know this area, Lizzie. It wasn't, well, it occasionally is on the coast actually. A case called Bleaky and the National Trust back in, I think, 1983, about Boroughbridge Mump on the Somerset levels.
I do indeed.
You being a Somerset girl,
I do indeed know it, yeah.
It's a kind of like a mini Glastonbury tour with
with a tower on it.
What's a church? It was a church once. And a pub at the bottom called the King Alfred, because it's near where King Alfred, Athelney Marshes, where they burnt the kings. And it is occasionally, I suppose it is coastal occasionally, because when it every year it's
and the levels flood,
it's an island. But there'd been, on that particular occasion, there'd been landslips of the houses at the bottom of the Boroughbridge, and there'd been landslips which had people have been complaining about and the likes over a period of years. And the owners, the National Trust, didn't do anything about it. Then in 1976, there was the great drought of that year, followed by heavy rain.
Well, apparently we're even hotter in 2026 than the summer of 76 now.
Well,
so
that went on for a long, long time.
Need to watch out for that.
Yep, that went on for a long time, was either until the August bank holiday, as I recollect. I remember being a child and having to queue up for water. But anyway, there was a major landslide which caused damage to these properties, and in that particular occasion, the court of appeal decided you owe a measured duty of care even for non-feasance, and because you should have known about the potential for this major landslip, you should have done something about it. And because the National Trust didn't, it's a reasonableness test, but because they didn't, they can be sued. But in Holbeck Hall, the court decided that you did owe a measured duty of care, but this was sort of sudden, catastrophic, couldn't have been predicted unless you'd done geological surveys of the land and the likes, and there was no real reason to do that. And there was again another case called Green and Lord Simulaton from Norfolk-Suffolk border, which said a similar kind of thing. If it's something that is totally unforeseen and once in 100 years, 50 years or whatever activity, you don't owe that same duty. So in Holbeck Hall, the council were not liable. But don't buy properties on the edge of cliffs.
That's a good takeaway from this podcast.
Don't stay in them on your holiday either. And that's properties falling into the sea.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Thanks.